Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Elements of Success. I am so delighted to be here with you in the midst of these topsy-turvy lifetimes to anchor into nature's wisdom and find a new way forward. So I can't believe it's already episode 3. This has been so much fun so far, and I hope that you are getting something out of this. Today, we're really finally leaping into more of the elemental aspects of this whole framework that I have put together. So let's just dive right in. Welcome back. And episode 3 is all about the power of our personal mythology. And we're entering the Earth chapter of this journey. So, just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna, Lughna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I'm a licensed trauma therapist, a mindfulness instructor, an author, a speaker, a manifesting generator. I just kind of do it all. And perhaps most importantly, I am a druid. And that is part of what has really framed out this offering is bringing you practical druidic wisdom alongside your modern life. So just as a recap, last time in episode 2, we talked about redefining success and how there is this success paradox that our external achievement does not necessarily equal our internal fulfillment, especially if it's not coming from a soul-aligned place. Nature teaches us about sustainability, cyclical rest, interdependence over independence, and diversity and enoughness. And these are nature's definitions of success, not societally driven ones. And that's my invitation to you is to consider how you can move away from those societally driven definitions. We'll talk a little bit more about that today with the personal mythology. But we also explored the historical roots of where we find ourselves today, how hustle culture came to be and how that was born out of the Protestant work ethic movement that led into the Industrial Revolution, and then sort of capitalism as a religion, capitalism as a way of life, if you will. And unfortunately, there is a very high price for this kind of lifestyle. We end up paying emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and in our communities. And that's what I want to continue to call us out of and weave in something that's more powerful and more aligned. And I taught you a little bit last time about my force method: focus, observe, reflect, connect, and engage. And this is a tool that you can use anytime with pretty much any problem to really sink in and ask, what is my definition of success? What is my authentic success? And finally, a quote from last time: success is the ability to flourish while enabling all other parts of your ecosystem to flourish too. So, as always in these episodes, I encourage you to have a journal on hand in case you want to jot down any notes. Like if I say something that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I needed to hear that," that you have the opportunity to write it down right away. But of course, wherever you're accessing this, you'll also have access to the slides when you view the replay. So, let's get into it. Personal mythologies. Ugh. We tell so many stories all the time. We are carrying stories around with us constantly that are running the show in the background. And these narratives, these stories, these myths in many cases, literally shape how we perceive ourselves in the world around us. They determine what we believe is possible for us. These stories begin to shape who we perceive ourselves as, our sense of literal identity, and our purpose. Our stories, the beliefs that are running in the background create the foundation for all of our choices. And they exist. They often operate beneath or below our conscious awareness. So these stories, if we don't take the time to listen and see what's going on, these stories can really, really, really mess us up because they can, cause us to run the show in a really misaligned way. I know that if someone is carrying a story of "I'm unworthy," let's just there's so many of us running around with that story. Just that simple story. I'm unworthy of insert whatever here. I'm unworthy of love. I'm unworthy of that promotion. I'm unworthy of a happy, healthy relationship. I'm unworthy of a family. If we're running the I'm unworthy script in the background, it's just back here, sort of nagging away at us, it's literally going to shape the foundation of how we're showing up in relationships. Well, I'm not worthy, so I'm not going to really take that in. I'm not worthy, so I'm not going to show up for that meeting where we're talking about how well I'm doing. I'm not worthy, so I'm not going to receive this gift or this opportunity because I'm just not worthy. And something as simple as just having that running in the background, even without our conscious awareness, can cause us to tell some really messed up stories about ourselves and fail to show up for ourselves, fail to show up in relationships because we don't believe insert whatever thing we needed here. So I want to break down where this personal mythology shows up, sort of the layers of our beingness that these stories come into. So I loved this little picture up here of the earth and kind of the layers of the earth. There's all of these. We see the turf, we see the grass and the tree level, but then there's all of these inner layers of rock crusts and magma and molten core and all of that. So we are like that too. We have all of these layers, we have all of these bodies. And these stories, you would think a story might just be mental, like it's just something that we think, but it's really predominantly reinforced in the mental body. But the impact of these stories floods out into every other layer of who we are. So mentally, the thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations we hold, those are the core of the stories. But emotionally, thinking that story over and over, reinforcing that on a conscious and subconscious level, can create an emotional pattern that begins to arise. So, if we're thinking that we're unworthy, we may start to notice depression or anxiety or fear or shame or any other number of emotions around the story, I'm not worthy. Spiritually, the stories that we tell ourselves can, the stories we tell ourselves can really disrupt our spiritual connection. I remember I had this story I told myself. So I was very involved in a spiritual community for many, many years. And several of the people in that spiritual community, I realized were running really problematic behaviors, were not showing up in any way the way that I thought spiritual people would show up. There was this dissonance in what I was seeing and the story that I held about what being a quote unquote spiritual leader meant. And as they started to have problematic behaviors that were very visible to me, I, at the time, had a story that I was unworthy, that I was hierarchically less than, that I wasn't the authority. And so I actually diminished my own spiritual relationship. I cut off my spiritual relationship because I adopted a new mythology that spirituality must therefore look like what they were doing. And I didn't like that. So these things can really end up disrupting our ability to connect with the essence of who we truly are, to connect to spirit, to connect clearly to our emotions. And then if you're like me and you have chronic illness or chronic fatigue, or you've had ongoing autoimmune issues, or anything in your body that gives off really strong signals, these can also be a product of our stories. So, as another example, when I look back on my journey to come to the diagnosis of fibromyalgia, it really was a journey of me continually bypassing what I knew my body needed to push and hustle and grind harder to stay in my people pleasing lane and do what I thought was expected of me. The toll was my body falling apart. So I had a story that I needed to be productive all the time, that I needed to hustle, that I needed to work, that I needed to do all of these things. And because I was running that story, my body was like, hello, stop, full stop. We are going to make you ill. We are going to force you to slow down and look at what's really happening. So by the time that we've reached that physical layer of how our stories are impacting us, it's often, it's gone tissue deep, it's gone bone deep. And that is when we really might wake up to the fact that there are these stories, these foundations running the background. And then finally, community. So our stories shape how we show up in relationships. So I'll just go back to I'm not worthy as a core fundamental belief that many of us carry. If I'm not feeling worthy, if I don't believe myself to be worthy, how am I going to show up in relationship? Well, anything that's positive, anything that's healthy, I'm probably going to reject. I'm not going to trust it because I don't think I'm worthy of that sort of love, of that sort of care, of that sort of compassion, whatever that might look like. If my story is that community is harmful, that it's ugly, that it's toxic, I'm either going to isolate from community and want nothing to do with it, or I'm going to accept toxicity and abuse and control dynamics because they're quote unquote normal. So we have to confront these stories at every single level and see how they are shaping the way that we look out there. I'll say, one more note on this. What about our racial stories? What about our stories about people of other religions? What about our stories about people from different cultural heritages or who have a different sexual orientation or gender presentation than us? What stories do we tell about what it means to be those sorts of people? And how does that interfere with our ability to show up and be in relationship and to be grounded in truth and authenticity and peace and stability and safety in our bodies too. So truly all 5 of these layers have to be addressed for us to be able to be really healthy and in alignment and experience collective well-being. So if we continue to hold these false myths about who we are, we will operate as not who we are. And that's just like a simple fact that unfortunately we think we still have to. We have to do these things. So I want to tie this in stories to earth because we're actually landing in the earth element for these next few episodes. And as we do that, we're looking at stories from different angles because our stories really are the ground we stand on. They do determine our sense of stability and safety. What stories we tell, what we hold is building the building blocks, the foundation of our growth, of how we show up with other people, of how we show up in our careers, how we literally do everything. Our stories are our roots, our family, our ancestry, our early life. What experiences did we go through that made us who we are today? Those are our stories, our legends. Some of them I wish we could view them as like legends or um just like old-timey stories that we look back on and we learn the lessons from, much like we do a book or a TV show that tells a really good story. I wish we could look at our own stories like the hero and heroine's journey that they are, right? Because our stories are our connection to the world. But how do we tell those healthier stories again? We'll get into that. So our stories do shape our connection with the physical world. So again, it is routed in the physical body. We traditionally think of the earth element as representing the body. So the saying you are what you eat, very true. First of all, I think nutrition's super important, but we are also what we think. So the stories we're telling ourselves are literally shaping the way that we're interacting with the physical world as well, because whatever stories we're telling literally influence how we are going to show up. And our stories also provide the soil in which communities grow. Again, for telling stories of isolation, it's not going to work. So, in Druidic tradition, earth is the wisdom of the foundations. It's sustenance and community connection, growth, grounding, stability, safety, strength, endurance, like all of these very embodied qualities. It is associated with the north and the Great Bear, the physical body, as I mentioned. So, when you're working with your stories, if you want to weave in a bit of a magical element, you can call on bear, you can call on elements of the north, you can call on your physical body, you can call on any of these traits. of strength and stability and grounding and whatnot as you start to look at your stories. So this is really cool. And I'm not going to get into all of it. At the end of this slideshow, there's actually several resource slides. If you want to look into the studies and the research, I've got some things you can read there. But there are a ton of scientific studies out there that actually show our stories change our reality. So it's really quite incredible how much the brain is processing consciously versus unconsciously at any given moment. But we do know about concepts like neuroplasticity, which means that our brains are stretchy, they're flexible. And the more that we work a certain pattern, the more easily we can access that pattern. So if we are saying the same stories over and over and over again, that groove gets really worked into the brain, and it's very hard to not be in that groove anymore. But we also know that mindfulness meditation, being mindful, doing things like coloring books, all of the things that stretch and grow our gray matter happen so we can also use that neuroplasticity to begin to tell new narratives. And there's so many different ways to do that. Yeah, this is so cool. Like the brain science is really cool. And literally what we are thinking begins to shape this physical reality. So what we think actually activates cortisol, adrenaline, oxytocin, all of those hormones that flood relationally, that flood in relation to trauma. I don't have it here, but one of the most important things I have ever shared with people is this. If you think at yourself like a bully, so let's say, when you were a little kid, your mom, your dad, uncle, whoever was like, "Ugh, when you do that, it's terrible. You're a bad person. Don't do that. That's silly. That's stupid." That's literally insert whatever insult some adult said to you when you were a child, and suddenly that inner voice is in there, and you're like, "Ugh, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't do that. I'm wrong. I'm awful. I'm whatever. I'm stupid. I'm silly." That has the same impact in your brain as if that external bully were the one doing it. So the impact of us having that negative thought or thinking that negative thing about ourselves is responded in the body and in the brain as if an external person were doing it. So when we perpetuate that and we build in that neuroplasticity of continuing to run that loop, that story becomes harder to resist. It becomes a part of the foundation of how we see ourselves. And we're flooded with all those hormones every time we think that negative thing about ourselves over and over and over again. So, one of the very cool studies that I encountered had to do with hotel housekeepers. And basically, this study was that they told some of the hotel housekeepers, this is really good exercise. All that you're doing for this job is really good exercise. And that was the only difference in the experiment. So they had two groups of the housekeepers. One group was told, "That's really great exercise, like good job." And the other group was not told anything. The group that was told, "This is really good exercise," began to lose weight and actually had lowered markers of things like blood pressure. They did not change their routine. They were literally just given the story, "Hey, that's really good exercise." And they started to believe, "Wow, this is really good exercise." And their body responded accordingly. So our stories really do change reality. There's so much on that to look into. So, as an example for me, one of my stories was that I was saved by a tree. I've talked about this in other episodes. I've written about this in poetry. As a child, I experienced neglect. And because I was experiencing neglect, I spent hours and hours in this maple tree in my great grandmother's backyard, literally in the branches, like laying there and like seeing this tree as a mother. So this tree became my witness, my companion, my life support, if you will. And so the story I began to tell is nature supports me even when people don't. And I'm sure that this story is so much of why I very naturally became fascinated by druidry and the concept of connections to nature, because I had that foundational story that people can't be trusted. People aren't here for me, but nature always is. And obviously, I've had to work with that story as an adult to be able to come into happier, healthier relationships and accept connection. But it was ultimately that adaptive story that got me through. I feel so alone, but I'm not alone because nature's got me. So sometimes these adaptive stories or grounding stories are meant to help support and even save us from something really terrible. But it's important that we can go back and we can begin to rewrite those stories. So I'd just be curious for you to think about what natural element, animal companion, or person was your earliest ally. Because for me, it was Mother Nature. It was this tree. Maybe for you, it was a grandparent, or maybe it was a cat or a dog, right? Maybe you can think of what was your earliest ally and how did that shape your story moving forward? So, I just want to list out some of the common disempowering stories. And again, all of this is here for you to come back to absorb, to integrate, to digest, to think about, because it's not all going to sink in right now. I just want to plant seeds. I want you to intentionally be aware of what are some of these stories that could be running the show. What are some of these foundations? Yeah, not surprisingly, our sisters and our brother. Yeah, sometimes our earliest allies are our siblings. Um, but regardless of who our allies were, we also had bullies and we also had external challenges and forces outside of our control that really may have challenged us and helped us begin to adopt stories that weren't so good. So, common disempowering stories, and I've divided these into those layers again: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, communal, because the stories are different depending on what layer we're in, what level of connection to our body and to the community that we're in. So, I'm not enough. I'm stupid. I'm worthless. Success requires constant struggle. I have to earn my love or my belonging, right? These are thoughts that can really start to run the show. Any of these you can hear in all of these how it's going to create distortion. So emotionally, it's not safe to feel my emotions. I know I ran around with this belief for a very long time. I was told my emotions were too big or inappropriate. And so I literally began to feel, well, it's not safe to feel my emotions. I'll just keep them bottled up. Right. And you can see how that kind of belief is going to enable things like chronic illness. Right. So it's so foundational, it starts to ripple out into all these other areas. My emotions are burdensome. My vulnerability equals weakness. Ugh, that's when so many of our men, especially, are running around with is vulnerability equals weakness. My feelings, my emotional beingness is a weakness. I just have to swallow it. That's one of the ones I hear all the time. Like, I just swallow my emotions down. I just have to swallow it. I just have to move past. I just have to move on. And that's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. So physical layer is things like I can't trust my body. My pain is just weakness. I need to override my body's signals. It's not safe to feel this. I'll sleep when I'm dead. No rest for the wicked. These are all physical beliefs that we end up carrying. These stories that what our body is, knocking at the door with, trying to get our attention, is something we need to bypass or ignore because we have detached as a society so much from the physical body. The physical body is expected to be beautiful and perfect and fit and thin and curvy and and muscular and this and that and like perfect. And any sign of misalignment, any sign of unhealth, we just ignore, we swallow that down. We push it away. And so we learn over time not to trust what our body's trying to get our attention for. This also leads into that spiritual layer. One of them is like my intuition's unreliable, and our intuition and our body signals often go hand in hand. So if we're disconnected from the physical body, we're also probably going to be disconnected from our intuition because those signals come in partially through the physical body, the foundational physical body. So spiritually, we might start to see ourselves as separate from our nature, from our community, from others. And that belief, when we believe we need to isolate, when we believe we're not part of something greater, is so damaging. It's so, so, so damaging to believe that we are separate, that we're not one unified planet, universe, species, neighborhood. Like literally, we see the division everywhere. This belief is definitely running the show societally, that we are separate from nature and from each other. We can end up with these negative stories like, my purpose needs to look like this. So for me, for example, I thought my purpose as a child who was groomed, I thought my purpose was just to be here to be pleasing for men for a long time. And that is not anyone's purpose in life. Right? Hate to break it to my child self who is suffering, but our purpose is something that's soul driven. And when we are swirling in negative stories and we're disconnected from ourselves and from others, we have no idea what our purpose is. We become immediately disconnected from that. So, if we're cut off from our body, we're cut off from our intuition, we are probably cut off from our ability to really choose what's right for us. And then I see this one all the time too. And this just, it breaks my heart. This belief, this story of like negative forces are out to get me. There must be a curse following me. There are these dark entities that are trying to consume my energy. Here's the problem with that. If you believe that, then it is going to be energetically true. Remember what we talked about earlier of the most important thing I wanted people to take away is what you think at yourself has the same essential impact on you as if there was that outside person doing it to you. So if you believe an outside entity is after you, you're putting that energy on yourself too. So it's a very fine thing, but we have to be able to see how these stories are shaping our literal lived experience. And then finally, the community layer. So I don't belong anywhere. I need to compete to have value. My needs come last in the relationship. I'm not really important. My stories don't impact others. I'm all alone. Our stories do impact our relationship with others because if we're telling a story again that I'm not worthy to connect or I can't trust other people, I can't trust my body signals, how is that going to allow us to show up in community? So I hope you're just kind of, again, no judgment, no shame, just thinking about what are the stories I'm running in the background that might be creating disempowerment for me. If you haven't noticed, I really like nature metaphors. It's kind of my shtick. And our stories are kind of like gardens. Our current stories are the results of seeds we planted a long time ago. And some of those seeds were planted by our family, some by our culture, by our society at large. Some of these seeds were planted by the most awful trauma that no human should ever have to survive. Some of these seeds are planted in the womb in our grandmothers because of generational trauma. And then, of course, there's random events. There's things that are completely outside of our control happening on a macrocosmic level that we are impacted by. I know currently, presently, here in this moment, probably a lot of us are running around with a story that it's not that safe to live in the world right now. And we look outside and there's some evidence, right? So those are events outside of our control, but they are still planting seeds in this garden of life. So sometimes we need to tend the stories, and sometimes we need to straight up uproot those stories and get them out of the garden. So if you're running around with those disempowering beliefs that we were just talking about, those probably need uprooting gently, compassionately, lovingly. They need uprooted so that you can enter a new way of being. And the tending, the nurturing is often the newer stories we're accessing for the first time, or the old stories that we were empowered with that unfortunately got lost in translation somewhere along the way, right? The weeds came in and overgrew the garden and kind of shut out the light for these other more aligned stories. So we get to create a shared landscape by how we show up and how we tend our stories, because those determine what can grow in our communities and in our connections. So, of course, I've got some druidic advice here for how to create more empowered stories and healthy foundations. And not all of these are going to apply, and that's totally okay. But considering nature's wisdom and what you can take away to really begin to build a new garden bed full of stories you're happy to go tend, that you're happy to go nurture and water and see grow. That's what I want for you. So, let's see where we can build new stories that honor natural rhythms and cycles instead of being built on hustle culture. Not here for that. Uh, how can you acknowledge your interconnectedness with all of life, that you are not a standalone being? Respect the wisdom of your body rather than treating yourself like a machine. Embracing this sort of shadow light growth, rest, embodiment, slowing down, being energetic, like just being, doing, receiving, this sort of flow, listening to the needs of your body, mind, and spirit as they ebb and flow instead of this constant like hustle and grind. Valuing your uniqueness without isolating or competition or striving. Really, can you tell the story of how unique and beautiful you are? Because you are. That's my whole thing in this world, is to encourage you to embrace the beauty of who you are, your unique story, your unique path, your unique contribution and purpose. And this one can be really, really hard. Seeing challenges as a part of a larger story. Again, I see it as the shadow light dance. We go in and out of ease and challenge, shadow and light, the working and the being, the doing and the receiving, like all of that we're ebbing and flowing in out of. So if we can say, oh, challenge, totally normal part of human experience for me to face a challenge. And it's a part of my bigger story. It's not a forever reality, right? When we look back, we see we have overcome so many problems. Recognizing our personal power means releasing hierarchy and competition. One up, one down dynamics, not good. If you have to be one up on somebody in order to feel good, that's hierarchy. If you're constantly putting yourself down and you're like, I have to be beneath others to be accepted, also not good. We need to see our personal power and that we are all equal beings. And our individual stories create our collective reality. So our work matters. What we are doing on the individual level matters because it's one thread. You are one thread in this huge tapestry of life. And if you can bring a vibrant story to the table, an empowered story to the table, that will reverberate out into everyone else. I truly believe. So honor the community web that sustains us without that need for hyper independence. So we're going to do a little practice here. I'm going to invite you. You can do this on your own later and go outside. But I'm going to invite you to just put your feet on the ground wherever you are right now. This is very rare for me to do. I'm doing it with you. Just feeling the connection of your feet to the ground. So you might even wiggle your toes and feel how it plants in. You might feel your heel. You might rock the feet from side to side to feel the way the soles of the feet connect with the earth as you shift the foot. Just feeling your foundation here, getting curious about what's literally beneath your feet. And as you feel that connection to the earth beneath you, just asking this gentle question: what story am I standing on right now? What story am I standing on right now? Maybe it's an empowered story. Maybe you're in a really exciting chapter of your life and you're like, yeah, I'm standing on the foundation of my power, how much of a badass I am, all the things that I'm here to accomplish, and all of the rest I'm here to enjoy. Maybe the story's a little more wobbly. Maybe it's, I don't know where I'm going next, or I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. Just noticing. No right or wrong, just where you're at right now, what story you're standing on. And just visualize roots connecting outward, connecting you out into your community, connecting you down into the earth beneath you, just connecting you outward. You are not alone. You are not isolated. You are held. You are supported. Can you hold that story? Can you adopt that belief? You are held. You are supported. And just take a couple of nice deep breaths here. In and out, feeling each breath flowing down into your roots. And as you exhale, just soften a little. And now asking the question, what story would be more supportive to my growth and to my community? What story would better support me, my growth, and my community? Just breathing and seeing if a new narrative gently arises to the surface when you think about consciously accessing what story can I begin to carry with me? What story can I work on holding that's actually the story I want to be telling? How I want to empower myself, how I want to grow and be connected in community. And knowing you can come back to this, you can journal, you can more deeply ponder. Just again, seeing if you can receive the story I am supported, I am connected. What would it mean if you could believe that fully, completely, without worry? I am supported and connected. And just feel the support of the roots once again, sensing, seeing, knowing that the roots are there beneath your feet. I'll invite you to begin to consciously pull them back in, consciously reconnecting with your body fully. And if you closed your eyes in that experience, you can gently open them and just take in the space around you. Gently, gently, gently. It's important to remember that we are rooted. We have the capacity to tune back into these roots anytime, right? This is just one moment, one little experience, but you can practice this. That's why this is here. This is something you can practice. If you are facing a conflict, right, you can ask, what story am I telling right now? What is the foundation for why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling? And then, is there another story that I could tell that would better anchor me into where I need to go next? Oh, I'm so glad. That is 100% the message we needed to hear today. I love you too. Yeah. We are always learning and growing, and we can root down into this network, this interconnected web of life simply by dropping in. So I really encourage you to keep doing this, connecting with the stories, the foundations. So here are your red flags that you need to replant some new stories or you need to do some uprooting. If you're persistently exhausted, if you feel like you're looping the same patterns, if your body is rebelling, if you feel disconnected from life, or you're experiencing discord in your community. These are all signs maybe you need to tweak something. Even one of these signs is an important signal, right? Physical patterns, mental patterns, emotional patterns, communal patterns, feeling the spiritual disconnection. These are all these different layers So listen to these different signs and signals. They're here for you. So if your story is conflicting with who you really are, you're going to feel discordant. If you are doing the same thing over and over and over again and banging your head against a wall, as they say, that's the definition of insanity, right? It's not for you. Uh, Physical symptoms that don't have a clear medical cause, yeah, probably an out of alignment thing, right? And I know that that is a tough pill to swallow because I have been there on my own journey. Coming to accept that me bypassing my own needs led to chronic fatigue and illness. But that feeling of separation or isolation, those are all red flags. So listen to those, come back to center, back to self. We're not going to do these journal prompts right now, but I definitely encourage you to come back to these. These are going to help you really begin to identify what your current myths are, your current empowered stories, your current completely outdated based on something mom said when you were 7 that just stuck around forever. Like these are going to help you get into the root of those. So you might use these as journal sentence starters. So I'm the kind of person who, the world is a place where, my purpose is to, my body is, success means, my relationship to others is. So you can already probably, like, as I'm even reading them out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, I can hear that part of me that has that old story. Like the world is a place where insert, all these scary things here. So these questions are meant to help you get into the root of things. And I invite you to go further and ask, where did this story come from? Does it actually support or serve me? Does it limit or harm me? And how does it impact my community and my relationships? So you can view these slides again when you get the replay. So I really recommend journaling on these. Like these are going to get you into the core of things big time because you're going to quickly discover how you have created your foundations, what beliefs and stories are currently running the show in the background. And if you know me, if you've been working with me or following along, you know that redefining success is so important to me because many of us think success looks like the burnout and the hustle and the accolades and the this and the that, and nothing that's really healthy for us. So, looking ahead. This is your weekly invitation. If you can't tell, I was a public school teacher before, so I love to make sure that there are tangible steps you can take. Never believed in mandatory homework. I was super irritated that the school system made me give away homework, so I tried to make it as easy as possible. These are just invitations. If you're like, I am in it, I am trying to win it for myself and for everyone else, these are just invitations that you could begin to put into practice. And I'll try to give them to you every week so that you have that opportunity to go deeper if you want. But I invite you over the next week or two to really notice one story that's running your daily decisions. Chances are it has something to do with something you're afraid of, something you're ashamed of, or something that you are either currently disappointed in or afraid to be disappointed in, whether that's yourself or someone else. But if there is a negative story or an outdated story running around in there, it probably has to do with one of those three things: shame, fear, or disappointment. The next thing to notice, again, it could be an empowered story. If so, yay, I'm super excited for you because we need more people running around with empowered stories. But whatever the story is, notice and identify. Is this running me mentally? Is it really bringing up emotions? Is it disconnecting me or connecting me spiritually? Is there something showing up in my body? Is it in my community? It might be all of the above. Spend a few moments daily, if you can, with a grounding practice. Grounding practices literally mean exactly that: grounding your energy down, allowing your emotions to be received by your seat, by the earth, by the grass, feeling your connection to your physical body and to the earth beneath you, feeling your life force. All of these can be grounding practices. So that practice could be the one we just went through, where you're just literally, what are my foundations? What am I standing on? What story am I telling? I'm feeling into my roots. I'm connecting outward. What's going to help me be in better connection with myself and my community? Right? These kinds of questions. And then maybe you journal. Maybe you journal about what's coming up that serves or limits you. And then if you have a person to share, you're always welcome to message me about your ahas. Guide@safrianna.com is the best place to email me, but you are always welcome to share your insights with me. I get all kinds of cool insights in my inbox that I'm just like delighted that someone showed up for themselves and had the insight and are excited to share it. So if you don't have another person to share with me, but finding trusted people in our community is essential to building better stories. So keep rooting into that. And then you can begin to imagine a more aligned story, an alternative story that feels more aligned if you want to reroute it. So if you find yourself really tangled in that shame, fear, disappointment, maybe what would be the alternative story? What might be an opposite or alternative view to this that feels more aligned to where I'm at right now? And remember that your awareness is the first step in building a new foundation, and that's where we're all at, is consistently and continually coming back to awareness to stay appraised of the way that we're building our foundations. So next time, we're going to come back to Trauma North. Trauma North is one of my concepts I have been teaching clients for forever. It's something that dropped in as a download one day, and it really gets us into what is the trauma that we circle and cycle back to over and over and over and over and over again that creates this northward pull in our life. And how does that create our internal compass? How do we know when we need to recalibrate? So, all of that will be on the next episode. When you get the slides, again, I just want to remind you the slides for this episode have a couple at the end that are all research. I'm not going to show those to you now because you're either super into the research or you're not. And we don't need to go through all of it. But I hope that you learned something new today and that you can sit with how your stories are literally shaping the way that you're seeing the world, the way that every situation, every scenario that you confront day to day is being processed through those internal stories, beliefs, myths, legends, lore, whatever you want to call it, that we have just been carrying around. But you have the power, you have the capacity to take these stories, flip through your own book, and in some cases rewrite or not entirely erase it all, because we're always going to have the imprints of that past stuff, but rewrite over, create something new. Use that neuroplasticity to our advantage to rework a new groove. It takes effort. It takes immense effort, but it is so worth it. So I hope that you feel inspired to continue building even more positive foundations. Like I said, next time we'll be back with episode 4 to talk about Trauma North. And in the meantime, I see you. I believe in you. I'm cheering you on. I'm Safrianna Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. And as always, it's a delight to be here. Thank you again, Passionistas TV, for making this possible. And if you have follow-up questions, let me know. Until next time, bye for now.